My boyfriend had been severely bullied in school. To protect him, I was forced to drink dirty water, crawl like a dog, and have photos taken of me, which were then posted online. Even when I later developed depression, I still smiled and encouraged him, saying, "Don't be afraid." We had been in a relationship for 7 years, from campus life to wedding dresses. I thought I was his redemption. Until the night before our wedding. His first love came to see me and played a recording. That's when I found out that Grant had been with me only because of a bet. And that the bullying, which had haunted me like a nightmare, was a fabricated scheme he had created to win the bet. In the wedding car heading to the hotel, Grant leaned in and gently kissed the corner of my lips, ignoring the driver and the best man in the front seat. "My beautiful baby." I stiffened and forced a smile. "I'm wearing makeup, don't kiss me." Grant was in a well-tailored black suit, his bangs combed back, revealing a smooth forehead. He looked at me with concern, his eyes brimming with tenderness, almost overflowing. "What's wrong? You don't seem very happy." I was momentarily dazed, unsure whether he was acting or if he was sincere. "I woke up too early, I'm a bit tired," I said. His sharp eyebrows rose slightly. "You're not regretting marrying me, are you?" I froze for 2 seconds. After a pause, I casually pinched his cheek. "What are you thinking?" Grant took my hand and held it firmly, his gaze deep and soft, like a well. "It's too late to regret now. Sarah, promise me, never leave me, okay?" Grant had always been insecure and possessive, and I had known this even when we weren't together. If this had been before, I would have kissed his beautifully shaped lips and smiled, telling him, "What are you worried about? You saved my life." During the 6 months I had severe depression, all my friends distanced themselves from me, but Grant stayed by my side, unwavering. After surviving what felt like life and death, our love felt especially heavy. But now, I looked at the man I once loved most, and all I felt was a heart full of unfamiliarity. My eyes flickered, and I turned to look out the window, trying to hide. "Are we almost there?" "Sarah, you haven't answered my question." Grant, always perceptive, softened his voice and didn't let up. His sweet, teasing tone from when we were in love now sounded in my ears, but it only irritated me. I turned my head toward the car window. "I'll take a nap, wake me when we're there." "Okay." Grant hesitated, then leaned in to kiss my forehead lightly. "Rest well." The best man in the front seat sensed the tension and turned around to tease us. "Grant, can you act a little more grown-up? If this keeps up, she's going to have you wrapped around her finger after marriage. You talk too much." Grant laughed and cursed under his breath, holding my hand even tighter. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I looked up and said coldly, "Isn't this exactly what you wanted from the start?" The two men froze at the same time, their faces blank. The best man, Evan, had been close to Grant, and no one would have guessed that he had led the bullying of Grant back in university, which I had witnessed several times. Outraged, I collected evidence to help Grant report it to the teachers, but since Evan was the nephew of a school leader, the school ignored it. Grant was beaten worse, and I was dragged into it as well. At the time, Evan's favorite thing was to dump a bucket of filthy water in front of me and say, "Drink it, or I'll hit him." I hesitated, and his lackeys already threw a punch at Grant. Grant's face was forced to the side, and he glared at Evan with hatred. "It's none of her business, come at me." The bucket of water was murky, foul-smelling, and filthy. I fought to hold back my nausea and forced 2 words out of my throat, "I'll drink it." Grant's eyes went red with panic, and he shouted at me, "Sarah, do you think you're a savior? Don't drink it." Evan laughed, clapping his hands. "You two didn't even know each other before. For someone you don't even care about, you've made enemies with us. Sarah, do you think this is worth it?" With my face and nose soaked in the rancid water, I wondered briefly. Was it worth it? I didn't know. I could have chosen to ignore it, but maybe because I studied law, my sense of justice and compassion far exceeded others. I hated school bullying and wanted to save Grant, but I also wanted justice. But even though I used all my strength, the people led by Evan were only detained for a few days. This time, I had completely angered them. The next day, they slapped me over 20 times, forced me to crawl like a dog, and insulted me with the dirtiest and most degrading words. When I collapsed on the ground like a dead dog, I heard one of them mockingly say, this girl is the campus beauty of the law school, her face is amazing. Wonder what her body's like. I shrank back, begging for mercy for the first time. I'm sorry, please. They laughed lewdly. Look at her, we're not doing anything else. I struggled and screamed, but they pinned me down, my arms and legs immobilized. My clothes were ripped off, and their disgusting, sticky fingers roamed my body. Purple bruises appeared on my porcelain white skin, and tears blurred my vision as I was surrounded by despair and helplessness. If I had a knife in my hand, I think I would have stabbed them all without hesitation. That day, they didn't just watch, they took pictures. The next day, the sexy photos of the law school's campus beauty spread across campus. About a week later, I was diagnosed with severe depression and forced to take a leave of absence from school. Grant rented a house off campus and stayed with me day and night. He cried a lot, and the words he said most often were, "I'm sorry." When I refused to eat, he fasted with me. If I cut my wrist with a small knife, he would copy my actions and cut himself the same way in front of me. I can't explain exactly when my feelings for him grew, but by the time I realized it, I was deeply entangled and couldn't escape. The year we graduated, I discovered by accident that Grant and Evan had set aside their past conflicts and became very close. So I privately reminded him, "Evan bullied us like that, how can you still be friends with him?" He patted my head and sighed softly. My family's company has a lot of business dealings with his. Social connections can't be avoided. Sarah, people have to look forward. His voice was light and airy, almost as if he was hinting at something. We had a huge argument about it. Grant gently coaxed me, and even had Evan come over to apologize. I couldn't understand it. Bullies didn't deserve forgiveness, and Grant, of all people, was someone who would hold a grudge forever. I genuinely hated Evan, but at the same time, I loved Grant to the core. Out of sight, out of mind, I no longer interfered with their relationship, but I never gave Evan a warm look. 5 years later, the night before my wedding to Grant, his first love, Brenda, came to see me and played a recording. That's when it all became clear to me. Grant and Evan had been in it together from the beginning, conspiring to play me like a fool. After hearing the recording, I stood there in shock, my heart feeling like it had been ripped apart, the pain so sharp it was hard to breathe. It turned out that the bullying had been a carefully planned conspiracy. I couldn't sleep that night, and torturously listened to the recording over and over again. I still couldn't understand why the man who had sworn he would marry me was the same one who had bullied me and caused my depression. After I asked that question, there was a long, heavy silence in the air. I tiredly closed my eyes. Sorry, I'm just so tired. They didn't suspect anything. Grant pulled me into his arms, resting my head on his shoulder. Take a nap. We arrived safely at the hotel. In the fitting room, I touched up my makeup and looked at myself in the mirror. The wedding dress was designed by a famous domestic designer, simple yet elegant. I naturally thought back to the day we took our wedding photos, when Grant suddenly had red eyes halfway through the shoot. I finally get to marry you, Sarah. He half-kneeled before me, reverently kissing my fingers, his tone so emotional it was nearly choked with sobs. I'll give you a grand wedding. My princess, who I hold in my palms, deserves the best this world has to offer. The photographer also praised my beauty, saying the way the skirt of my wedding dress flared made me look like a princess from the clouds. Yeah, I had never seen myself look this beautiful. But I couldn't bring myself to feel happy. Ding. A message came in. It was from Brenda. Have you thought about it? Or if you want to run away from the wedding, I can help. After a final rehearsal, just before the official ceremony, Grant quietly came over to me. If you feel nervous later, just have a piece of candy. He opened his palm, revealing my favorite orange flavor. Something inside me stirred, and I remembered the past, when he had been bullied by that group of people, often coming home covered in bruises. I felt a pang in my heart, wanting to cry, but I forced a smile to comfort him. Here, take a piece of candy, and it won't hurt anymore. Later, that group of people turned their attention to me, and I became the target. Whenever I was depressed to the point of self-harm, Grant would hold me tightly, shoving a piece of candy into my mouth. Sarah, you said, eat a piece of candy, and it won't hurt. The scars on my wrists were still oozing blood, and I heard his voice, trembling, with an edge of fear. Don't leave me, Sarah. I'll die. The familiar taste of orange candy spread across my tongue, and a faint glimmer of hope stirred in my heart. Grant, the ceremony is about to start. Huh? Is there something you're hiding from me? My voice was a little hoarse, and my fingers, which hung down, trembled slightly. Grant hesitated, something rare for him. But only for a moment, before his dark eyes filled with tenderness again. Why are you asking this all of a sudden? I stubbornly repeated, is there something you're hiding from me? He raised his hand, as if to ruffle my hair, but when he saw my carefully styled hair, he lowered it again. We've been together for 7 years. Don't you trust me? Yeah. I gave a self-deprecating smile and muttered, 7 years. For 7 years, he had played the role so flawlessly. If he became an actor, he might even win an award. Grant gently squeezed my palm. All right, relax, Sarah. Right now, nothing is more important than the wedding. Okay. I nodded. Grant, I gave you the chance to be honest. But you didn't take it. I watched his back as he walked away and made a phone call. Brenda, I accept your offer. I clenched my fingers, and flashes of the past rushed through my mind. Bloodstained scars, harsh slaps, vulgar teasing, and disgusting touches. If it weren't for that bullying, I might have already become a great lawyer, fighting for justice in court. Instead of being forced to drop out, heartbroken, and abandoning my law degree. Running away from the wedding isn't enough, I said, the coldness in my eyes growing. I'll give him a wedding he'll never forget. After all, bullies deserve to go to hell, and those who betray true love should swallow 1,000 needles. Grant is guilty of both. How should I punish him? Surrounded by flower girls, I smiled and slowly walked to the center of the stage. The officiant smiled at Grant and asked, the atmosphere is so good. Groom, would you like to take this opportunity to confess your love to the bride? Grant took the microphone, and his sharp face softened with a smile. Sarah, you have no idea how happy I am today. Proposing to you was the best decision I've ever made. Marrying you is the luckiest thing that's ever happened to me. I smiled back at him. But meeting you, thinking I could save you, was the worst decision I've ever made in my life. With that thought, I smiled, my eyes curving like a crescent moon. A wave of applause rose from the crowd. Before the exchange of rings, the officiant read the vows. Grant stared at me, his eyes burning like wildfire. I do, he said. Sarah, I will love you forever. When it was my turn, the officiant asked, Bride, do you take the groom to be your lawfully wedded husband, to live together in the holy bonds of marriage? A short distance apart, my gaze met Grant's. I shyly lowered my eyes, about to speak, I. Behind me, the large screen showing our love story suddenly froze, and then a familiar, casual male voice suddenly interrupted. Hey, school's so boring. Want to have some fun? The background noise of the audio was chaotic, and many people chimed in with laughter. Haha, what do you want to do this time? Let's make a bet. The beauty of the law school, 1 month, I'll make her fall head over heels for me. Cheers and whistles rang out. I've seen that girl, what's her name again, she smiles like a little sun. Are you switching tastes? This beauty isn't simple. There were so many confessions when school started, but I heard she doesn't care about love and wants to focus on her studies. Grant, can you handle it? The voice of the guy let out a faint, indifferent laugh, mixed with a hint of playful confidence. What little son? I'm going to drag her into the mud. But I need you all to play along with me. After all, it's more fun when we all play together, right? The recording abruptly cut off. The room fell silent for a second, then chaos erupted. The officiant stood frozen, and the guests in the audience began whispering to each other in shock. Grant was stunned. It took him a moment to realize what had happened, and his eyes turned red in an instant. Before he could react, I spoke first. Grant. From disbelief to despair, my voice caught with just the right amount of anguish. I still held the microphone, and my voice echoed painfully throughout the hall, amplified for everyone to hear. I didn't say anything more. I just called his name, but it was enough to throw him into confusion. Sarah, listen to me, this isn't real. Someone must have deliberately sabotaged our relationship. It was all computer-generated, you can't believe it. I had never seen such an expression on Grant's face, the one who was always regarded as a Prince Charming. First came shock, then regret, and finally, anger. The sound technician? What's going on? He yelled helplessly, desperate to find something or someone to blame. I couldn't speak. I could only look at him with a heartbroken and disbelieving gaze. Tears streamed down my face, and I covered my mouth, crying silently. The redness around Grant's eyes deepened, and his obsidian-like eyes were filled with panic. We locked eyes for a long while. Finally, he seemed to gather himself and reached out his hand toward me. Sarah, please, let's finish the wedding first. I'll give you a reasonable explanation. Without a doubt, Grant loved me. He loved me so much that marriage had become an obsession for him. He was desperate to announce to the world that I was his wife. Grant, I'm not a fool. After shouting that with a choked voice, I kicked off my high heels and lifted the layers of my wedding dress. Turning around, I ran toward the exit. Love is not his excuse for hurting me. The imprisonment disguised as love is truly disgusting. I made up my mind to expose his true face at the wedding he had planned for so long, to destroy his obsession. The sudden turn of events caught everyone off guard, and the crowd immediately grew restless. I heard many people calling my name from behind, but I didn't stop even for a second. Brenda's convertible sports car pulled up as promised in front of the hotel. She smiled brightly, took off her sunglasses, and waved at me. Sarah, I'm here to rescue you. Brenda's personality is a lot like my old self, but with an added flair and confidence. She grew up with Grant, was in love with him for years, and when he rejected her confession, she left for studying abroad in anger. After learning the truth last night, I was heartbroken, but still couldn't help but question her, whether she was lying to me just because she couldn't have Grant. She didn't hold back, and slapped me on the head. It's been years, I'm already engaged. I only came back because I felt guilty seeing you marrying that scumbag, just wanted to remind you once. She also suggested I make a copy of the recording, just in case. And it turned out to be useful. As I was about to get into the car, I clearly heard Grant's voice calling my name. Sarah. I turned around to look. He was wearing a custom suit, his broad shoulders and long legs more pronounced. He should have looked dignified and elegant, but his eyes were red, and all his grace was gone. Don't go, don't leave me. We promised to be together forever. He stared at my face, his carefully styled hair disheveled by the wind, some strands covering his eyes. Combined with his sharp features, there was a kind of desolate beauty to him. But after just one glance, I got into Brenda's car without hesitation. Take me to my place, and please drive fast. After driving for a while, Brenda looked at me with shining eyes. I thought you'd soften up, but you did well. When it's time to cut ties, just do it. I closed my eyes and didn't look at the slowly shrinking figure of Grant in the rearview mirror. Thank you. I said it sincerely. Brenda smiled carelessly. No problem, I do good deeds every day. Just treat me to a meal next time. I agreed willingly. She dropped me off downstairs, and before leaving, she warned me again. He'll probably come looking for you tonight. Don't soften up, okay? I think I've figured it out. He's just a yandere. Ever heard of that term? It's really scary. I got it. I couldn't help but laugh, thinking this first love of mine certainly had some unique traits. That night, Grant waited downstairs at my place until morning. Dozens of missed calls, hundreds of messages, all begging to see me just once. I read them all, but didn't reply. Brenda was probably overthinking it, but anyone who's been through school bullying wouldn't show any mercy to their abuser. For the next week, I locked myself at home and refused to see anyone. My parents were upset with me for making a fuss, and some kind-hearted friends came to comfort me. Some of our college classmates were on the guest list. After they went back, they made the whole thing into gossip, spreading it everywhere. The wedding had been so grand, and on the day of, a number of gossip reporters showed up, capturing the full process of my escape. Thanks to them, Grant, Evan, and the others became notorious, the laughingstock of the city, everyone's target. On the evening of the 8th day, I finally calmed down and went out to have dinner with Brenda. As soon as I stepped outside, I saw Grant's luxury car parked blatantly downstairs. He had been leaning against the car for who knows how long, looking haggard, with stubble on his chin. In just a few days, he seemed to have aged 10 years. cigarette in hand, surrounded by a pile of cigarette butts. When he saw me, Grant froze for a moment, then immediately snuffed out the burning cigarette with his bare hands. He anxiously tried to explain to me, "Sorry, I didn't mean to smoke." Hearing that, I felt somewhat dazed. He had always smoked, but I hated the smell. After graduation, he suggested we move in together, and I thought it was too soon. He kept pushing until I finally agreed, on the condition that he quit smoking. He promised, holding me tight, "Whatever you say, wife." Since then, I never smelled a trace of smoke at home. It's no longer my problem. I walked past him. He grabbed the hem of my clothes, his voice pleading and pitiful, like a stray dog abandoned by its owner. "Sarah, you knew, didn't you?" Grant wasn't stupid. The scene Brenda and I orchestrated at the wedding was clearly planned in advance. "Yeah," I said flatly, "I've known from the start that the whole thing was a show directed and performed by you, Grant." "Are you done yet?" "I'm going to eat." "Please don't, Sarah." Grant clung to me, his voice weak. "I was just a kid back then, it was all a joke." I laughed bitterly in anger. Picking up a cigarette butt from the ground, I looked down and asked him, "Do you know what it feels like when it's pressed out on your shoulder?" I pulled down my collar, revealing the scars, big and small. 7 years, and these scars are still here. How could Grant not know? Countless nights of passion, he left marks all over my body. What was he thinking back then? Was he moved by his own affection, or was he simply reverently playing with a trophy? I looked at Grant, who was stunned, and smiled. "Do you know what it feels like to be slapped 20 times, or to have your clothes ripped off and pictures taken?" "Stop." Grant yanked me into his arms, holding me tightly, his voice choked with emotion. Maybe he had gotten too caught up in his own drama, forgetting that he too was part of the show. "I'll kill them all, okay? I'll avenge you, Evan, and everyone who ever hurt you. I won't let any of them go." Brenda was right. Grant definitely has a Yandere side to him. He's possessive and obsessive, and once he fixates on someone or something, he never lets go. But I smiled, showing a cruel grin. "They're all your instructions, Grant. You're the one to blame, aren't you?" Grant was deeply shaken by this. His eyes filled with rage, trembling as he tried to cover my mouth. I smiled brightly, flipping through my phone. "I still have those photos, want to see them?" Grant, avoiding it, grabbed my phone and turned up the volume. "It's all in the past, Sarah. I've told you so many times, we need to look forward." I just stared at him. After a long pause, he finally gave in, eyes red. "Sarah, what do I have to do for you to forgive me?" I lowered my eyes, thought for a moment, and then smiled. "Only by experiencing the suffering I went through will you have the right to ask for my forgiveness." I had my lawyer draft the divorce agreement and send it to Grant's house for him to sign. As expected, he refused. "Sarah, I'll make it up to you in my own way, but I absolutely won't agree to the divorce." For the next month, Grant truly showed me his compensation. I didn't block his number, giving him the chance to contact me. First, there were a few photos. I opened them, and they were selfies with his bare upper body. Dark scars covered his tanned arms and shoulders. I recognized them immediately as cigarette burns. Some of the edges were red, probably from recent burns. From his forearm to his collarbone, the scars were dense and disturbing. I frowned and typed a question mark. Grant replied almost immediately, "Sarah, the suffering you went through, I will make it all happen to me." "Do whatever you want," I replied. The next day, he sent a video. The man in the video was wearing loungewear, his hair messy, his eyes red-rimmed. In front of him was a blue water bucket. The camera zoomed in on the bucket, revealing dirty water, with vegetable leaves and oil floating on top. Grant spoke in a hoarse voice, "By the way, we haven't exchanged rings yet. I'll finish this bucket of dirty water and then come to your place. We'll exchange rings and complete the final step of the ceremony, okay?" Without hesitation, he picked up the bucket. As his Adam's apple bobbed violently, the water level slowly dropped. After drinking about a third, Grant suddenly stood up and staggered off toward the bathroom. 2 minutes later, he returned to the camera, his thin body slumped, his face smeared with a gray liquid. He forced a smile and, looking through the screen, asked me, "Feeling better, Sarah?" I didn't react. The video was over half an hour long, but I turned it off halfway through, disgusted. That was only the beginning. What does a hunter with an obsessive desire for possession fear the most? I closed the chat window and called Brenda. I thought you were going to introduce me to a new boyfriend. Tell him to come over to my place. Not doing anything, just a date at home to save money. A few days ago, I had treated Brenda to a meal. She couldn't stand how tense I always looked and offered to set me up with someone. She swiped through her phone. How about this one? A dentist. Super classy. I had rejected him without thinking, but now that Grant was coming over, if I wanted to hit him hard, I needed backup. The dentist arrived quickly. His name was Luke, handsome, with a warm, refined air. 10 minutes later, Grant knocked on the door. I was the one who opened it. The moment the door swung open, madness flickered in Grant's eyes. He grabbed Luke by the collar and slammed him against the wall, shouting, "Who the hell are you?" Luke didn't seem fazed at all. "I'm Sarah Suter. She invited me over for dinner." He smiled slightly. "You must be her ex-husband, Grant, right?" "I'm Sarah's husband, the legal kind," Grant gritted through clenched teeth. "You're pursuing her? Am I dead to you?" I casually reminded him, still wearing my apron. "We're already divorced." Grant released Luke and glanced at me, his face a mask of sorrow. "Sarah, I told you, in my dictionary, there's no such thing as divorce. It's only widowhood." "Oh." I shrugged dismissively. "There are many ways to divorce. I'm trying to spare you the embarrassment. Don't force me to take this to court." Grant's eyes turned bloodshot, and tears traced his sharp jawline. It seemed like he didn't hear me. Trembling, he pulled a small box out of his pocket. "You said the diamond was too big and too flashy, so I had a designer create this one just for you. Here, Sarah, let me put it on for you." Luke stepped forward, brushing Grant's hand away with one swift motion. "Mr. Grant, you're interrupting my dinner date with Miss Sarah." The silver ring clinked as it fell to the floor, the sound sharp and clear. It almost felt like the sound was signaling that my connection with Grant was done for. Grant froze for 2 seconds, then suddenly snapped. "What the hell do you think you are?" "Grant." Just as his fist was about to strike Luke's face, I shouted. "We're done. How much longer do you plan to make a scene?" The hostility in his body evaporated the moment I spoke. I bent down to pick up the delicate ring. In front of Grant, I casually tossed it into the trash can. Why keep something useless? I watched his expression crack, piece by piece. As if that wasn't enough, I leaned closer to his ear and sighed softly. "You're a great actor. Sometimes I wonder, since you managed to lie to me for 7 years, why didn't you do a better job hiding it? You could have fooled me for a lifetime." Grant's eyes were almost pleading, his voice hoarse, raw with emotion, as if sandpaper had scraped his throat. "You said, if you could experience the pain I went through, you'd give me another chance. I've done that, haven't I? Sarah? How about this?" I raised an eyebrow coldly. "Kneel and apologize to me, then I'll think about it." Without hesitation, Grant bent his knees and dropped to the floor. Like a dying dog groveling at my feet. "I'm sorry, my Sarah, I'm sorry." My mind drifted back 6 months. Grant, dressed in a sharp suit, half-kneeled in front of me, holding flowers and a ring, asking for my hand in marriage. That day, my makeup had been ruined by tears, and I clung to his waist, making threats. "Grant, if you ever treat me badly, I'll never let you off the hook." He sealed my words with a kiss, urgent and passionate. "I love you, and I'll love you forever." Back then, those heavy promises felt real, but now, in this moment, they were nothing but a joke. I lifted my head, unwilling to let him see my reddened eyes. Grant was still pleading, desperately. "You say kneel, and you actually kneel, how low can you get?" I sneered, laughing cruelly. "Maybe, the only way I'll ever let go of the grudge is if you're dead." Grant left in a daze. For several days, I didn't receive any videos from him. Under Brenda's persistent matchmaking, Luke began his aggressive pursuit of me. I saw the gossip in the city, and to be honest, I really admire Miss Sarah for her bold and passionate personality. I felt a little embarrassed. "Sorry, I'm not interested in dating right now. You must have figured it out by now." That day, I was just using you. If it weren't you, it would have been someone else. Luke raised an eyebrow. No need to apologize. I'm just glad you picked me, not some other man. I smiled faintly. Thank you for your feelings, but I've got to go. I'll leave first. Without looking back, I got up and walked away. My last relationship cost me 7 years of my life. Perhaps the pain was too deeply etched, but right now, I had absolutely no interest in men. Half a month later, during the company's regular meeting, I suddenly received a call from Grant. I hung up, and he called again. I hung up once more, and he switched to a different number. Unable to take it anymore, I snapped, "Are you serious?" I wanted to say, "Are you done? It's been a few quiet days, and now you're back to causing trouble." But the second half of the sentence got caught in my throat. On the other end of the phone was a stranger's voice. "Hello, may I speak to Miss Sarah, Grant's wife?" Grant jumped off a building at 1 p.m. "Please come to the police station to claim the body and confirm the identity of the deceased." The phone dropped to the floor as my mind exploded. Grant really died? Because of what I said, maybe only when you're dead, I can truly let go of everything. He took half a month to arrange everything, and at 1 p.m., he stood on the rooftop, calmly ending his life. The police said that before jumping, he had written a note on his phone, addressed to me. I paused the meeting and stared blankly at my computer screen for a long time. I didn't ask the police what the note said, nor did I go to identify the body. I had made up my mind to cut ties with him completely. Was this my revenge? I couldn't describe what I was feeling. Just recently, I was in his arms, discussing wedding details. I said I wanted to have a daughter after marriage, to do her hair and put her in beautiful dresses. Grant buried his head in my neck, his voice muffled. "I don't want that. I don't want a child taking your attention away." I poked his forehead. "Hey, you're jealous of a daughter? I've told you so many times, I love you the most. Having a child won't change that." His fluffy head rubbed against my neck like a clingy puppy. Half serious, half acting cute, he said. "Sarah loves Grant the most, but Grant only loves Sarah." Lovers turned into enemies, and all that remained was a cold, lifeless body. Lying in the morgue, unclaimed. In a daze, I remembered Grant's words. "In my dictionary, there is no divorce, only widowhood." A self-fulfilling prophecy. The wind blew in from the window, and I exhaled slowly. So be it. Grant, let's not meet again in the next life. We are clear. Brenda and her fiancé were going abroad to settle down, and I saw them off at the airport. Before they left, I gave her a big hug. "I won't say much more, but when you two get married, I'll give you a surprise gift." Brenda smiled softly and tucked a stray hair behind my ear. 7 years ago, at a gathering of old friends, I accidentally recorded that audio and saw through Grant's true nature. Unable to accept that the person I had liked all my life was a complete scoundrel, I chose to study abroad and stayed away for years. During that time, I occasionally thought about how that girl who was tormented by Grant was doing. But by hiding the truth, I was no better than one of his accomplices. "So you came back to save me?" I looked up at her and met her gaze. "Thank you, Brenda. It's because there are people like you that this world doesn't seem too bad." She stared at me, smiling. "You're a lot like me, Sarah. Your empathy and sense of justice go far beyond others. If it hadn't been for that disaster, you should have become a great lawyer. Maybe I still can." I winked at her. "I'm preparing for the bar exam. In my spare time, I go to universities in the city to give lectures on anti-bullying laws." Brenda gave me a thumbs up. "Speaking of which, aren't you curious about what Grant said to you before he died?" I shook my head. "From the moment you told me the truth, right before the wedding, we've had no relationship anymore." "True," Brenda nodded, "you always see things clearly. By the way, my friend at the police station said that when he jumped, he was clutching something in his hand, and even after he died, he didn't let go." I felt a sudden chill. "What was it?" "Hey, turns out it was a piece of candy, just one of those common orange-flavored hard candies." "Really strange, huh? He commits suicide but is holding on to candy?" Bonus Grant. After leaving Sarah's house, I was numb, each day feeling like a year. I locked myself in my room, drinking, passing out, waking up, and drinking again. Evan couldn't stand it anymore, broke down my door, and grabbed me by the collar, yelling at me. Are you out of your mind? There are plenty of beautiful women out there. What kind of woman do you want that you can't get? My blood boiled, and I clenched my fist, slamming it into his face. Don't you dare insult her. Sarah was more than just a beautiful woman to me. She was mine, my one true love. Evan cursed and stormed off. I lay on the floor, my mind hazy, and Sarah's figure appeared before me. With her high ponytail and bright smile, she was like a vibrant little sun. That was Sarah, 7 years ago. I had arranged for Evan and his friends to beat me up on the path she would take to her dorm, and when she saw them, without hesitation, she yelled. Hey, you guys, stop it, or I'll call the teacher. I had planned to evoke her sympathy, but I didn't expect her to fall for it so easily. She was the most radiant, most righteous girl I had ever seen. And so I became even more determined to pull her down from the sky and drag her into the mud with me. What started as a bet turned into something I couldn't escape from. I fell in love with Sarah, and her smile became addictive. Evan noticed and asked if I wanted to stop. I laughed. It's not enough that I like her. You guys need to force her into liking me, no, loving me. So they stripped her, uploaded photos to the campus website. When Sarah was on the brink of collapse, I was the only one by her side. See, I could be her savior. I wanted everyone to envy the little sun that smiled only for me. In the days that followed, even though I burned myself with cigarette butts, leaving scars all over my body and slashes across my wrists, Sarah never looked at me again. Her words kept echoing in my mind uncontrollably, maybe only when you die, I can finally let go. Maybe only when I die. Why not? I thought. As long as Sarah is happy, what is my life worth? I think I must be crazy. After taking half a month to arrange everything, on a summer afternoon, I stood on the rooftop. Before jumping, I typed a few words on my phone. Sarah, my wife, I've transferred all my assets to your name. You love law and believe in fairness and justice, use this money to do whatever you like. Don't be sad for me. Death is my choice, the best way to make it up to you. Sarah, this might be the last time I call you that. I love you. I put down the phone, took out a piece of the orange candy I always carried with me. Unwrapped it, held it in my palm, and jumped. The wind howled in my ears, and the candy melted in my hand, sticky and strange. It was as if Sarah held my hand and said to me, eat a piece of candy and the pain will go away. And,